So this thing of, making all sentient beings something personal really helps in your practice. Yeah, that there's individuals that you're working for, individuals that you see with your own eyes, that you relate to in one way or another. Yeah, because if we don't do that, then we could think, oh, I'm meditating and they're making noise and they're disturbing me. Why are they doing that? Whereas if we think, I'm doing my practice to benefit them, and how kind they are working and doing what they're doing so that I have the leisure time to practice and to listen to teachings. The situation is the same, but our experience is totally different, just depending on how we look at it. Yeah, so whether we look at something from a viewpoint of me, or whether we look at something from a larger, more inclusive viewpoint. Yeah. And I remember one of Zopa Rinpoche, when he would teach bodhicitta, he would really emphasize the thing that if you leave one sentient being out of your field of compassion, it is impossible to get enlightened. Yeah. You may have compassion for all countless minus one sentient beings, but the fact that you don't have compassion for one means we can't get enlightened. So you said, we're dependent on sentient beings to be able to attain our own awakening. Yeah, we attain awakening in dependence on them by the force of our compassion towards them, and that leading into generating bodhicitta. And bodhicitta has to have as its object each and every single sentient being. So if there's one that we just say, forget that one, I don't want to help that one's just too much, can't stand him, then again we are preventing ourselves from fulfilling our own deepest heartfelt wish. Yeah, so it's not sentient beings damaging us, it's our own limited mind. Yeah, which is the actual thing we're trying to overcome. So of course the limited mind is going to come in there and create problems. Yeah. But to keep that in mind, and then, when you're places, really look at each individual sentient being and think, I'm getting enlightened to benefit that one. Yeah? And I want to do my practice to benefit that one. So it's very interesting to do that, when you look at each and every, I don't know, we have some kind of flying things that they aren't bees and they aren't yellow jackets. The ones that just hover in the air, what are those? The nameless ones. Yeah. Yeah. But those, there's so many of them. And to look at each one and say, that one, my enlightenment is dependent on that one. And on that one, and on that one. Yeah? My enlightenment depends on the existence of each one of those, and my compassion for each one of those. And without that sentient being, I can't fulfill my deepest spiritual wishes. Yeah? And that completely changes your mind. Yeah. And especially, if you have problems with the state of the world and what's going on, then you have to think each and every person, each and every person who wants that Keystone XL pipeline that's going to mess up the environment. Each of those, my enlightenment depends on them. Yeah? Each and heavy, greedy banker. My life depends on them. My enlightenment depends on them. Yeah? And so you look at each sentient being like that, and then you can't really keep them in that category of greedy banker or, environmentally ignorant, materialistic, capitalist. You can't just assign somebody a category and think that that's who they are forever and ever. You can't look at each guy in prison. That child abuser, that murderer, that guy who assaulted, that one who, that rapist, that this, But my enlightenment depends on each and every one of those. Yeah? And when you do that, again, you can't just put people in a category and throw them out the window and say, you're worthless. Yeah? So it's a very helpful practice to remember this. Yeah? When you see your minds getting narrow or judgmental or something like that, very, very helpful to do this. That's going to actually lead into these Vinayas of the 7 Buddhas. But first I want to talk about the 7 Buddhas. Because for the longest time, I was trying to figure out who these 7 Buddhas are. Because they say in our fortunate eon, there are 1,000 Buddhas, meaning that 1,000 wheel-turning Buddhas. In other words, when there's no Dharma in the world, these particular Buddhas appear to teach the Dharma. Of course, there's many more than those 1,000, but there's the 1,000 wheel-turning. And Shakyamuni Buddha is the 4th. So, how do we get 7 previous Buddhas? Okay, so I went online. Because I've asked my Theravada friends, I've asked my Mahayana friends, nobody seems to know. But I found out. And this is from Master Wat, City of 10,000 Buddhas, from a commentary that he was giving on one sutra. Okay, actually he was teaching on the 6 Patriarchs' Dharma Jewel Platform Sutra. Okay? So, the 7 Buddhas are the most recent 7 Buddhas. So the eon, the fortunate eon or the fortunate kalpa before ours, was called the Alamkara kalpa or the adorned kalpa. So the last 3 Buddhas of that kalpa are Vipassin, Sikhin, and Visbahu. And then in our kalpa, called the Bhadra kalpa, or the fortunate kalpa, Bhadra, Bhadrakalpa, the Bhadra kalpa, the fortunate eon. Okay, then Kanaka Chanda is the first one. His name means worthy of offerings, because he is worthy to receive the offerings of humans and gods. And his name also means adornment. And then the second Buddha in our fortunate eon is Kanaka Muni. I know Muni means capable one. I don't know what Kanaka is. Then the third one is Kasyapa Buddha. And then the 4th one is Shakyamuni Buddha. Okay? So, Then I also found out that in Theravada countries, they hold elaborate festivals to honor 28 Buddhas. And the last 7 of those Buddhas, they have Vipassin, Visbahu, Sikhin. So in this order, Vispasu and Sikhin are reversed from the other order. Then Kanakachanda, Kanakamuni, Kasyapa, and then Gautama Buddha, which is Shakyamuni Buddha. Okay, Shakyamuni was the clan. Siddhartha was his personal name. Gautama must have been a family name within that. So in Theravada countries, they usually call him Gautama. Gautama Buddha. In Mahayana, it's usually Shakyamuni Buddha. It comes to the same thing. Okay, so when we're talking about these Vinayas of the 7 Buddhas, these are the most recent 7 Buddhas, even though 3 of them are for the eon preceding our fortunate eon. So that puzzle is solved. Yeah? Yeah, for the longest time, because I read this all the time, because what we're doing is we're going through the summary and the dedication of the Posada ceremony that the bhikshus and bhikshunis do twice a month. And so in it has the 7 Vinayas, of these 7 Buddhas. Yeah, so finally, we know who they are. So each Buddha, okay, like after the one we did yesterday, we said fortitude is the first and foremost path. The Buddha regards this as supreme in his teachings. One who has left the household life, yet annoys others, is not called a Shramana. Okay, then it says, this is the Vinaya of the Tathagata Vispasin, the unattached one, the fully awakened one. Okay, so the Tathagata, they're all Tathagatas, fully awakened ones. Unattached one, okay, that is someone who has gone beyond craving. And remember, we were saying the other day that although ignorance is the root of samsara, when we talk about the 4 noble truths, and the second one in particular, the origin of dukkha, then the illustration that's used is craving. Yeah? So craving for sense objects, craving for existence in samsara, craving for wrong views. There's many, many different kinds of craving, but they all fuel our samsara. Okay? So when it says the unattached one, attachment, sometimes it depends how somebody's translating the word, but sometimes people translate the word that's usually translated as craving as attachment. Okay, but the meaning there is the same. Okay, so the unattached one, somebody who has completely abandoned the craving for any sense, pleasure, desire, even for any existence in the upper realms and the heavenly realms where you're born because of deep states of meditation. Yeah, so any of that kind of craving has been abandoned. And then the fully awakened one. Yeah, so someone who has not just attained liberation from cyclic existence by abandoning craving and ignorance and the other afflictions, but somebody who has perfected the bodhicitta and who has abandoned also the cognitive obscurations that prevent attaining full awakening. Yeah. So while the Buddha is also called an arhat, a liberated one, a foe destroyer, the English translation of arhat, somebody who's destroyed the foes of the afflictions, a fully awakened one is given, that title is given specifically to the Buddha, not to other arhats. Yeah?
If you all Tathagata, they have attained everything, why they have specific qualities? Is it because that's the route to awaken, that's the quality they work most on?
Okay, so they all the Tathagatas have the same qualities. Yeah, we may sometimes talk about one Tathagata emphasizing something or having some speciality or whatever, and that's because of the karma of the beings that he has the easiest possibility to benefit. Okay, so although from the side of a Tathagata there's no hindrance to benefiting anybody, from the side of sentient beings have stronger karma with one Buddha or another, perhaps because of their previous relationships when they were all sentient beings, or perhaps because of that way of thinking of that particular sentient being. Okay? So it's kind of like, we have so many meditational deities. They all have the same qualities. Yeah? But why do we say that Chenrezig is the Buddha of compassion and Manjushri the Buddha of wisdom if they both have the same qualities? Well, it's because of the way they appear in order to benefit sentient beings. So one appears in a form that makes it easier for sentient beings when they meditate on them to understand compassion. Another appears in the form that easily generates wisdom. Okay, and so too with the different Buddhas, we may have, sentient beings may have stronger connections with some. So they say that's also why it's important that we attain Buddhahood. Because somebody could say, well, there's so many Buddhas already, why do I need to attain Buddhahood? Yeah, there's already so many, why do they need me? Why can't I just hang out on the beach? Yeah, and the answer is because we have special karma connections with different sentient beings. Although we have karma connections with every single sentient being. They've all been our parents. We've all had, infinite kinds of relationships with each and every living being. Still, there's some that we have stronger connection with. Yeah? And so if we get enlightened, it benefits directly those beings that we have the stronger connection with. Okay, so that's why sentient beings' happiness is dependent on our practice. Okay? And so the same with all the Tathagatas that already exist. Okay? So we had some strong karma with Shakyamuni Buddha, but we didn't have the karma to be born when he was alive. Yeah? So who knows what in the world we were doing when the Buddha was alive and teaching. We might have been at the beach, we might have been in the lower realms, we might have been spaced out in the God realms. We don't know. So we didn't have that fortune to be one of his entourage, his direct disciples when he was alive. But we certainly have the fortune to be here while his sasana, his dispensation, his doctrine is still present. Yeah. Okay. Then also another little thing before we go on to the next Vinaya is I think it was Shariputra who asked the Buddha once, why are some of the wheel-turning Buddhas, why does their doctrine last longer while the doctrine of other wheel-turning Buddhas doesn't last as long and degenerates more quickly? And the Buddha responded, if that particular Buddha taught the Vinaya in detail, the doctrine lasted longer than if he just gave it as like one verse, like we have it here. Okay, so in the case of Shakyamuni Buddha, then the Vinaya is quite detailed. There's many precepts, and so it it makes things much more specific for us in terms of what to practice and what to abandon. When you have one of the Vinayas that's like this, everything, the whole meaning is still included in that one verse. But you have to be really astute to be able to draw out the entire meaning when it's only in one verse. Whereas when it's longer and much more detailed, then it's easier to see, where that Vinaya is going and how it's regulating our behavior. Okay? So, that most of our precepts were set forth, were established by the Buddha due to a group of 6 bhikshus and 6 bhikshunis who were very naughty. And they were constantly making mistakes, and they were fairly rambunctious. And so whenever they did something that was disturbing to people, and the Buddha found out about it, then he established a precept containing that. So in one way, these bhikshus and bhikshunis were quite, how do you say that, yeah, what? Helpful. Yeah, in one way they were very helpful. In another way, they were really naughty. Okay? But, they often say we also have to thank them for what they did, because as a result we have, a very detailed Vinaya. And you can see that, like when you first take the 5 precepts in a ceremony, and you take the 5 precepts for life, the whole Vinaya is included in your 5 precepts pretty much. But you don't realize that, because when you look at your 5 precepts, you're thinking about, let's say, very gross actions of killing or very gross actions of lying. Whereas when you get into the Vinaya, there's all sorts of things that fall under the category of killing. It came up the other day, beating somebody, hitting somebody. That's not killing them, but it falls under the category of killing. Yeah, lying. That we have one precept not to cover our rice with vegetables or our vegetables with rice, because that's a form of lying when you're on alms round, and if you like rice a lot, then you have some rice, you cover it with the vegetables, then the people whose next house you go in say, oh, he has vegetables, no rice, I'll give him more rice. If you like vegetables, then you cover your vegetables with rice, so when somebody sees, oh, he only has rice, wants more vegetables, gives you more vegetables. So it's a form of lying, isn't it? It's a form of deception. Now, when you just have the precept about lying, would you think of that? That somehow you're finagling things in order to get more of what you want, and by being deceptive? Okay, we wouldn't think of that. Yet, when we have the whole Vinaya, then there's these little incidents that are pointed out to us of ways in which our deceptive mind works. So we become much more attentive to those things. It's actually quite helpful. Yeah. Similarly with the killing precept, we say, okay, I'll stop killing. But we may still beat people. Yeah. We may still punch him in the nose and think, well, that's okay. I'm not killing them. Yeah. Or the same with animals. We may torture animals or whatever and think, well, I'm not killing them. But when when you take the full ordination, then, for example, there's a precept about not pouring water on the dirt, but without checking to see if there's animals in the dirt that might get hurt by your pouring the water. And, as a monastic, you're supposed to always strain your water. Nowadays it doesn't really apply much. The water's already strained for us. But you're supposed to strain your water to make sure that there aren't any bugs that you would kill by just drinking it without straining it. So these kinds of things that would fall under the precept of not killing, that if you only take the precept of not killing, you're not going to think about. Okay? So it's quite interesting, when you start to really study your vows. And this is a good exercise for the bhikshunis and shikshamanas, to look at the different precepts and say, okay, what major category? Try to see the major categories that different precepts pertain to. Yeah, and how how different precepts depend on each other or help each other. Okay. So another one, we have a precept of celibacy. Now, for a layperson, they don't have the precept of celibacy. It's it's abandoning sexual misconduct, unwise or unkind sexual expression. But from that, you wouldn't necessarily imply celibacy. And then from that, if you want to keep a celibacy precept, then, for example, we have a precept not to go into a dark room with somebody of the opposite sex, and not to sleep in a room with somebody of the opposite sex. This is, of course, assuming everybody's straight. We all know that isn't the case. But, then doing that, well, why is that precept? You may say, well, why is that precept not to go in a dark room? Why we can't go in a dark room with a man? Well, it falls under the category of abstaining from sexual conduct. Yeah? Because we all know what can happen, don't we? Yeah? Okay, so these precepts, we start with the broad categories, and then we get more and more detailed as we go through. Okay, so that was I went way off in left field, but I hope, left field. Hopefully that was helpful. Okay, so then the second Vinaya here. Just as a person with clear eyesight can avoid a treacherous road, so a wise person in the world can avoid all negativities. This is the Vinaya of Tathagata Sikhin, the unattached one, the fully awakened one. Okay, so just as a person with clear eyesight, can avoid a treacherous road. So who is a person with clear eyesight? What does clear eyesight mean? Having wisdom. Okay, what kind of wisdom? Wisdom realizing the nature of reality. Only that wisdom? Yeah, okay. We also need the wisdom knowing how karma functions. We also need all different kinds of wisdom, of knowing conventional reality and how things work and how they function. Yeah, so it's not even just karma and its effect, but just how things work in the conventional world, because we live in a conventional world. And it's not like we're trying to just develop the wisdom realizing reality so we can space out in Never Never Land. Okay, we have to understand how the world functions, because the ultimate nature and the conventional nature depend on each other, and they're interrelated. And it's not like you live in the ultimate nature and then conventional reality totally disappears and becomes non-existent. If you think like that, you fall into the extreme of nihilism. Yeah, we realize the ultimate nature, but conventional things still exist. And if we're going to function in the world, we have to understand, how they work, and we have to understand cause and effect on many different levels. And if we want to help sentient beings, we definitely have to understand these kinds of things. Otherwise, we're going to look like a real dodo. Yeah, we won't be able to give a teaching or explain anything because we won't understand conventional nature. Yeah. Okay, so we need the two kinds of wisdom. Okay, who has that fully developed wisdom of both conventional and ultimate reality? The Buddhists. Do our Arhats have it? Why not? What are they missing?
They haven't eliminated cognitive obscuration, so the omniscient mind isn't present.
Okay.
Part of the wisdom mind to be able to.
Yeah. Do they have the wisdom realizing ultimate nature, the arhats? Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do. And they have some wisdom understanding cause and effect, but it's not complete. Okay.
Does it not be complete because they can't do it at the same time, which is what happens with the elimination?
Well,
How is it not complete?
it's not complete because they don't have the powers to see all the subtle functionings of karma. The mind is still obscured from seeing all phenomena at the accurately. Yeah. So there's one story of at the time of the Buddha, there was one old man who, he was kicked out of the house by his family because he was so sick and he was complaining all the time, and he was very upset when his family kicked him out, and he went to a monastery, and he was also not very smart, so they gave him the task of sweeping the courtyard, and when he was sweeping the courtyard, he was supposed to say, eliminate stains, eliminate dirt, eliminate stains, eliminate dirt, eliminate stains. And so he kept on sweeping the courtyard, and he swept this side, and that side got dirty. When he swept that side, this side got dirty again. And one day he was just like completely at his wit's end, and I sat there and cried, and he requested Shariputra, who's an arhat, please, may I become a monk. And Shariputra looked with his clairvoyant powers and didn't see that this, in the continuum of this old man, that he had created the cause to become a monk. So he said, sorry, we won't ordain you. So then the old man was really upset and really crying, and the Buddha came along and he requested ordination from the Buddha, and the Buddha could see that he had created the karma to become a monk, because at one time he was a fly on top of a pile of cow dung that was floating around a stupa, and that contact with that holy object put good imprints on his mind, and it tipped the karmic balance so that he had enough merit to be able to ordain. And the Buddha could see that, but Shariputra, who was known as the arhat, whose specialty was wisdom, could not see that. Okay? I may have confused the, clean dirt and clean state with this. They may have been two different stories. Yeah, whatever. But yeah, But the part about asking Shariputra and the Buddha and the cow dung, that's all one story. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So. Just as a person with clear eyesight can avoid a treacherous road. What's the treacherous road? Samsara. Only samsara?
Getting stuck in nirvana.
Yeah, personal peace. Yeah. So here we're looking at it from a Mahayana viewpoint. Normally you would look at this from just a fundamental viewpoint, in which it would mean samsara, but we're kind of looking at it from a Mahayana viewpoint. So, the treacherous road would be, any condition under the influence of either the afflictive obscurations or the cognitive obscurations. Okay. So somebody who has clear eyesight can avoid a treacherous road. Yeah, if you clearly know, what to practice and what to abandon, and karma and its effects, you avoid the pitfall of being born in the lower realms. If you understand the nature of reality, you avoid the treacherous road leading to rebirth and samsara altogether. Yeah. If you understand and can eliminate, if you have bodhicitta, and can eliminate the subtle obscuration, then you avoid the treacherous road of personal peace. Okay? So a wise person in the world can avoid all negativities. Yeah? So that's showing us if we want to become a wise person, yeah, it's not through understanding all the theories of economics and those kinds of things. It's through understanding both the functioning of karma and its effects and conventional reality in general, as well as the ultimate reality. Okay, so you can see that if you just look at this one verse, yeah, if you start really going into it, you can describe the whole path, can't you? Yeah. But in order to do that, you have to be very sharp, yeah, because this is a summary, and sometimes we aren't very sharp. We just get, we just hear something and, oh yeah. Our first level of understanding is, yeah, if you have clear eyesight, you won't fall into that hole when you walk down the path toward, down there, because there's a place where there's a hole. Yeah. So you start out understanding that, and then you get better. Okay, then the next one is do not slander or envy others. Always keep the precepts. Be content with food and drink. Always enjoy living in a hermitage. Concentrate the mind and take delight in vigorous effort. This is the Vinaya of Tathagata Visbahu, the unattached one, the fully awakened one. So do not slander or envy others. Let's start with slander. What are examples of slander?
Someone something that they did not do.
Okay. Accusing somebody of something they did not do.
Speaking badly of someone even if they did do it.
Yep, speaking badly of them even if they did do it. Creating disharmony with our speech. Yeah, because we translate that second non-virtuous speech, it's often translated as slander, and the definition of slander in the rest is what you said. But this particular non-virtuous speech is much more extensive. Yeah, really creating disharmony. Okay, so let's look. How do you create disharmony with your speech? Somebody, let's look at here's some personal examples, unless nobody here has created disharmony with their speech.
Well, if I have an issue with somebody in the community and I don't have the courage to go to them and work it out, honestly, I can go around and tell everybody else what my issue is and how that person's got to be dealt with. So everybody else gets a little suspect about that person because I'm suspect of that person. So I start poisoning people's minds on how they care about people. So then you get this suspicion in people's minds about who to trust and who to take care of.
Yeah. Okay. Very good example. Yeah. Instead of talking to we have a difficulty with somebody, instead of talking to that person, we talk to many other people and cause the other people to also be suspicious of that person. And then a lot of rumors starts from there, doesn't it? Because we may say something like, we may make a comment about some quality of that person, and then the person we tell it to doesn't realize it's just our opinion and thinks that incident or whatever really happened, and then starts telling people, oh, so-and-so really did this and this, and then of course it gets really blown up and you wind up with so many false accusations against somebody. And this happens not only in a monastery but in a workplace, doesn't it? Yeah? And then you scapegoat somebody in the workplace? We all know that one, don't we? Yeah, everybody talks badly about one person and gets together and yeah, like 6th graders. Remember? We did that in 6th grade. Yeah. And it happens in families, calling up different family members. Did you hear what so-and-so said? Did you hear what so-and-so did? Da, 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 da. And then that family member tells this one and that one and the other one. And again, we scapegoat somebody in the family. Mm-hmm. Yeah?
I think I've noticed that also taking a bit more subtle form where, let's say, somebody in the family who everybody has maybe already had a little back and forth about starts to say something or do something, and then there's this look that's exchanged.
Yeah.
And those little looks say quite a bit.
Yes.
And almost more insidious than speech.
Right.
More acceptable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So somebody's had an issue with somebody in the family. That person says something at a family meal. Everybody looks at each other like, you know? And nobody says anything. But by reaffirming each other's opinions, it creates, you know, a lot of poisonous attitude in the environment. Yeah. Yeah. And we do this, don't we? It's kind of a way of bonding with others. Let's all make, you know, so-and-so said their usual stupid thing. If we all look at each other and roll our eyes, then we bond with each other because we all have the same opinion about this jerk. Yeah. It's a strange way of bonding, isn't it? Yeah. It's a yucky way of bonding. Because the thing is that we feel, I've bonded with those people by doing that. But the point is, if those people treat this other person like that, pretty soon they're going to treat us like that. It's only a matter of time until, you know, the eye rolling or the little comments comes our way. Yeah. So instead of, you know, using that kind of stuff to bond with other people, it's good if we just cut that off. Yeah. And sometimes people have asked me, you know, at courses, they say, you know, in my workplace we all kind of scapegoat so-and-so, and I feel really uncomfortable about it, but everybody's there, and if I don't join in, then, you know, I have no way of relating to these people, but I don't like it. And what do? You know, I'm supposed to solve their problem. But, you know, I say just say how you feel. And just say, you know, I don't know much about that person, but I feel uncomfortable about talking about them this way. You know, can we talk about something else? Or, you know, the famous tactic, change the topic. Yeah? Just change. So often people do not realize when you're changing the topic. And you just lead the conversation somewhere else rather than letting people, you know, continue to harp on somebody. Mm-hmm. I think all of us have at one time or another been the person who other people have excluded. Yeah? Have you at some time or another been the person excluded? Yeah, we all know what that feels like. So, you know, do not slander others. So to be really careful with our speech, because it is tempting, you know, when you know, we're irritated, somebody did or didn't do something, and we're irritated, and then just to kind of complain to somebody else to release our irritation. Yeah? So, yeah, to be careful about that. Yeah? And to avoid, you know, making up theories. Yeah. Huh?
Put them out
and then put them out as facts. Yeah, right,
Or assumptions, thinking that we know what motivates people to do that.
right, right. Yeah, it's very easy to do when people on the construction crew don't show up. It's like, and you're irritated, and why aren't they here, and they must be doing this, and whatever. That's if you care about that. If you don't care about that, then you don't even notice that people aren't here. But if you're involved with the building and thinking about the financial aspect and all the pieces falling together, then you notice those kinds of things. Okay. Otherwise, it's like, they come, they don't come, who cares? Yeah. So it's that way in all of our own individual departments. Yeah, something that may irritate one person, nobody else in the community really cares about. But, we're irritated, and so we'll go kind of, tell somebody else. I think sometimes we need to kind of release in that way, but I think we need to do it in the sense of saying, I'm frustrated, and I'm just saying this to release my own frustration, I'm not trying to turn you against the other person, but, I'm just releasing my own frustration.
I think it's incumbent then on the recipient to also not get all excited, and that's where it really gets nasty.
Right.
So you can hear somebody's frustration and kind of help them and stay stable, or you can hear somebody's frustration and go, no, are you kidding? And then you're
right. Right.
Disaster.
Right, right. And see, that's the benefit, like if we use NVC and somebody expresses their frustration, then instead of talking about the content of the situation and getting worked up about that and talking about that with many people, we talk about that person's feelings. You feel really frustrated because, we have limited finances, and this is going to stretch out how much we have to pay and whatever. And the person goes, yeah, you understand me, thank you. Instead of, if we say, oh, you're right, that person, yeah. So here is where you can really see what being a good friend to somebody else means. And if we want to be good friends, how do we respond when people vent their irritation with us? Yeah? Do we say, oh, you're right, that person's really terrible. This is like, blah, 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 blah. Or do we say, oh, you sound, like it's really inconvenienced, or you sound really annoyed. Because you need whatever it is. Or you sound really angry. Yeah, and if the person's a Dharma person, you sound really angry. Where's your anger coming from? Yeah, why is this making you so angry? And so as Dharma friends, really helping each other investigate where our anger is coming from. Yeah. Venerable Jigme and I were driving into town. I hope you don't mind if I tell this story. And she started to, she was out of sorts with somebody and started to, tell me about it. And I said, who's angry? Yeah. Well, this person did. Who's angry? Yeah. Who's angry? It took a few times, but then she got it. Yeah. And it was like, and I think that, yeah, it was helpful. Yeah, exactly who's angry here? Yeah. Who was it? Who was offended? Who was insulted? Yeah. So, if we're able to do that with our Dharma friends, yeah, go up to Venerable Yeshe and pat her on the back, and she just melts. Yeah. Don't you? I sure have. What are you talking about? I think that kind of thing is, that's how we help each other. Okay. Okay, do not slander or envy others. Okay, some examples of envying others and the effect that envy brings.
Somebody's in the community envious of somebody's scholarship and ability to really take in the teachings and ask great questions that are helpful for everybody. And I go to judging, comparing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm jealous. They can do that and I can't yet do that. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so somebody else can understand the teachings. It seems like they understand the teachings easier. Seems like. And they ask intelligent questions, and we're still, trying to figure things out. So we compare ourselves with them, and then we get jealous because they're so bright, they're so intelligent. I'm so inferior. What's wrong with me? Old pattern, isn't it? Kind of, how old are you? How many years have you been doing that one?
Oh, I'd say, so I passed nonverbal, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, old pattern, and then we wind up in jealousy like that. So it could be over that. It could be we envy somebody's physical looks or their youth or their strength or their, ability to fix things, or, there's so many things we can get jealous of people for. Athletic ability, artistic talent, anything. Anything. Yeah, they can walk a straight line better than me. Yeah. Other examples of envy, yeah.
This is envy, but I can see my mind do person X and Y do this. Why don't I should be able to do it too. Sure, then my personal integrity goes up very low. And then, but especially when it has to do with guidelines like behavior. Seeing other people behave a certain way, I think therefore I should be allowed to behave that way too.
Oh.
I personally may not think right.
Okay. Oh, very good example. Okay. So there's something that you personally may or may not think is right. Sometimes, in some situations you may think it's right, some situations you don't. But you see some other people doing it, and how come they can do it and I can't? Yeah, this sounds like old behavior too, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, this is what we used to say to our parents. Yeah. How come my, younger brother, sister can do it and I can't? When I was their age, you wouldn't let me do it. And only now you let me do it. And they can do it too, but they're younger than me. How come? It's not fair. Yeah. Or how come so-and-so, her parents are so nice, they let her do it, how come I can't? Yeah. So it's the same thing, isn't it? Yeah. It's our 7-year-old behavior at 77. Or 47 or 17 or whatever it is. So-and-so can do it, how come I can't? And we may even think it's not something that's good to do. And we may even see, especially like from our own training, it's not something good for me to do. But they can do it, so how come I can't? Yeah.
I don't even do how come I can't. Yeah, they can do it, so I will do it too.
Oh, yeah? Yeah. They do it, so I'll do it. This is actually why it's important to choose spiritual teachers who we want to become like. Because we can look at our spiritual teachers. Well, they do that. I'll do it too. Yeah. So then you have to see exactly what your teacher's doing and have some wisdom about it. Yeah, if they're doing something that's not very good, don't do it. But okay. So do not slander or envy others. So slandering and envying others, both of them are ways of disconnecting ourselves from other living beings, aren't they? When we slander others, we're pushing them away. You know, we're pushing them away. When we envy others, we're pushing them away. Yeah. So what happens when we slander and envy others? What's the state of our own mind?
Anger.
It's a lot of anger. What else is there? Huh?
Sadness.
Sadness. Underneath the anger, there's some sadness, isn't there? Why sadness?
Because of self-centeredness, wanting all the happiness there is, and seeing others maybe having some kind that we don't.
Okay, so the sadness could come from the jealousy part of it. You know, they have what I don't have. Okay.
Sadness from feeling like you can't have or do what they do. You don't have what they do.
Yeah, sadness because you can't have or do what they do. But all these kinds of sadness, don't they basically come down to feeling disconnected from others? Yeah? Do you think that underneath this of, you know, I can't have or do what they do, you know, it's that you feel like that because you're making a gap between yourself and somebody else. Yeah. So there's loneliness in there too, isn't there? Yeah? When we're jealous, aren't you lonely when you're jealous? Yeah? Think about it. And you're jealous. We're separating ourselves out. I'm different from those people. Yeah. So every time I'm different, then we're cutting the connection. And so we feel cut off. We feel lonely. Do you think? I don't know. Think about it. Think about it and see if there's something like that under the surface. Yeah?
In that sense that you're describing, it seems like it's rooted in misapprehension or not correctly apprehending emptiness and impermanence. We're ascribing a permanent quality to a given person and their attributes, and that somehow they have this thing and we don't have this other thing. I am this, and the separation feeling is some sense of permanence of these two.
Yeah, yeah. They're inherently this way, I'm inherently that way. They're always this way, I'm always that way. Yeah? So you can see the misconception of seeing the impermanent as permanent, seeing what lacks a self as having a self. And how that produces feeling cut off, feeling lonely. Yeah?
Yeah, but also and that's all component and having this
Urgent?
having for satisfaction for some behavior concerns and I look deeply into it and I see there's worldly concern in it.
Yeah, there's a lot of the 8 worldly concerns. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Maybe even a little bit of haughtiness, isn't it? You know? When we slander people, the assumption is, I'm better than them. Yeah? When we're envious of people, the assumption is they have something good, but actually I deserve it because I'm better. Yeah. All these different ways in which we make dramas around I. Don't we? It's incredible, isn't it?
The thing about love is how it's raised in this culture of competitiveness and how that, from the moment we hit school or daycare,
Yep.
there just gets invasive, it's just there. And it
Right.
becomes all of it.
Yep. Yep. So the whole competitiveness of our culture. Yeah, all the time. And it does start from the time you're really little kids. Yeah, in Singapore, it's really awful because starting at what age do you start getting streamed? 9. then at age 9, they start dividing kids into different streams. And your whole future depends on your exams that you take at 9 years old, whether you're seen as, somebody who's bright or somebody who's never going to amount to anything. And, you're only 9 years old. And so many things can change so much when you're little. And yet, so there's so much competition, there's so much stress on these little kids to do well in their exams. Yeah, because you're already at a young age, you are competing with everybody else for your future job possibilities and income when you're 9. Not very healthy. Yeah.
Teaching special ed,
Uh-huh.
they did away with grades.
Yeah.
So we just made comments about their effort,
Uh-huh.
and the parents went through the
Oh.
dash that and we're back to grading these kids with
Oh, my goodness. Because the parents couldn't stand the lack of grades, huh? Wow. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking that it just went on from what we were saying, that this disconnectedness that starts and the jealousy and the envy that might just be a little bit insidious to start off with, but grows unless you correct it. It grows.
Yes.
If you don't correct it or somebody helps you correct it yourself. But it then fractures communities, because that's really later, it's building the foundation for anger that comes out in all sorts of other ways, the drugs and the stealing and all this, because really I just was thinking maybe it starts at that very low level, very early on, maybe there's at school or by your own parents. It's very dangerous.
Yeah.
The whole community as well.
Oh, yeah. Jealousy can very easily destroy a community. Very easily. Yeah. I mean, yeah. We just separate ourselves out. Somebody else has something and I don't, and, I want my revenge. And I want my revenge. I want to take it away from them. And then I want to have it, and so I've got to get everybody else on my side, and then we'll go out and act against that group that has what we want, what we deserve, but, hasn't been given to us. Oh, yeah, you totally fracture a community, or a family, or a workplace. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It also seems like a real misconception for a person to feel so separate when there are so many other people in the same situation.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That there's so many other people in the same situation, and yet we separate ourselves out. This only happens to me. Only I don't fit in. Oh, I'm the only one people are scapegoating. I'm the only scapegoat in the world, or whatever it is. Yeah, really, again, this whole thing of isolating ourselves from others, and you can see how grasping a true existence fits in, because the more we do that, the stronger the reification of the self is. There's this big solid self that has never been treated fairly in their whole entire life. Yeah. Yeah.
I went to a lecture where someone had studied racial differences, and it actually showed there was a boost in self-esteem in people who put other races down, a temporary boost in self-esteem.
Yeah. Well, that's Geshe Nawandarge used to say, we get together and gossip with our friend about other people, and the end result is we must be the best ones. So it's the same thing. You put down another group, your racial group, ethnic, whatever group it is, and then, well, that means that I'm superior. Yeah. Quite a strange way to get self-esteem, isn't it? Does it really bring self-esteem? Is that genuine self-esteem? No. Psychologists may measure it and call it self-esteem, but I don't think that's genuine self-esteem. Yeah. Okay, so we'll stop here. A lot to think about. Yeah. So what I'm trying to show sometimes is you just take something short and you sit and think about it in depth and flesh it out, and it becomes a whole very, very rich meditation for understanding lots of different things. I mean, look how into this discussion of do not slander or envy others, we pulled in grasping the impermanent as permanent, grasping a true existence, loneliness, lack of compassion, I have another thing in response to what Tracy said, do Tong Len. I'm not the only one in the universe this is happening to. Let's do Tong Len. And again, that establishes a feeling of connectedness with other living beings. Okay? So you just take sometimes one sentence and, you can put so many different Dharma topics together to understand it. And then especially when you're looking at your own life and seeing how slander works or how envy works. Yeah, good topic to do some meditation on.